I talk to young folks and adults all the time that you have a talent, gift, you have a skill that no one else has or possesses that you're called to use to help make all of us better. And we need you.
Welcome to the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. Each week, we bring you discussions with educators on how they use blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning to better serve their students. We believe teachers learn best from each other, so this is our way of lifting up the voices of leaders and innovators in our community. This is the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.
Hey y'all, Tony Rose Deanna here, they them pronouns, a designated hype person at MCP, and I am so excited to be in this space with a 2024 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, elementary teacher for almost a decade, if I'm correct, and now an adjunct professor at Bay Path University and founder and CEO of Cultivating Changemakers, Dr. Deshawn Washington. Welcome, Deshawn.
Thank you, Tony Rose. And Deshawn's fine to call me for today. I appreciate the love.
Yeah, I'm actually going to call you Dr. Washington because well-deserved. I felt like I was in your journey when you were going through your dissertation. I was checking out all the things you were posting on LinkedIn. So we're going to go with Dr. Washington. And so it's so exciting to be in this space with you. And again, thank you so much for saying yes and being open and receptive to being on this podcast. And before we get started, what is bringing you joy currently?
Well, what's bringing me joy currently on this beautiful day that we're in today is one, we're alive. So we have purpose. We have some goals that we still have to accomplish. I like to think of it as we have unfinished business. And because of the unfinished business that we have, there's still a joy to be able to walk towards the purpose that we have. I think in addition to that, we're making moves. We're empowering more people to walk in this life of joy through their call of action, whatever it is. I talk to young folks and adults all the time that you have a talent, gift, you have a skill that no one else has or possesses that you're called to use to help make all of us better. And we need you. We need you in the game. So the fact that all those people are still here today it's just an amazing amount of love that we have to show. And so that's what I'm most joyful for. And all the other things, that is what we call the bonus. We get the bonus points for everything else we learned today.
Yeah, and that's such a great reminder for me and the listeners as well, right? Like there's a lot of the unfinished business. I feel like our business will never be finished, honestly, in this journey of life, right? And just a reminder of like, we need you, right? Like we need you. Every individual has a strength. Every individual has a skill set that's their own. And so that's such a beautiful way to start this conversation. And so, okay, so Dr. Washington, I actually got a chance to be in the same physical space with you as you at MassQ back in 2024, I think. And I was so drawn with all the things that you were saying and also just saying that like, here is a Black male educator, right? As an elementary school teacher, and the things that you were saying, I was just like, yes, yes, yes. And I had told you when we talked for a little bit, I was like, I want to have you on the podcast. And y'all, 2 years later, here we are.
Rather late than never, though, right?
Right. And I was telling Dr. Washington too, my follow-up game is weak, but here we are now, and that's all that matters. And I had the joy, actually, of watching your your TED Talk on the power of joyful trouble. So I kind of wanted to shift with that conversation too, because what a powerful statement, right? Like joyful trouble. Let's talk about how you came up with that. Like, because that's so cool, right? Like you don't get to see joyful and trouble in the same sentence. So what inspired you to have a talk about that?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing that inspired me was that in my classroom, I taught second grade, third grade, fourth grade for about a decade or so, as you mentioned. And, in teaching young folks, we talk about this innate spirit, if you will, about joy. How joy is something that's within the heart that is not taken away like happiness, which happiness, you can go have ebbs and flows with happiness based on circumstances, situations. We could be happy in the moment and then something else can happen and we can have a different emotion. It doesn't have to be necessarily bad, but just may not necessarily be happy. So define emotion. Joy is something that's in the heart. And it's something that you can have joy in the midst of a sorrow season. a midst of mourning, and also have joy in the midst of celebration and successes and everything in between all that too. So joy is something that's continuous. The idea of putting joyful and trouble together, the late Congressman John Lewis, he talked about good trouble, way back when, and I really like that term of good trouble, and to match like what's going on here today with everything that's going on in society, politically, and what's going on economically, financially, personally for people. There's a joy aspect of shaking the table, of shaking the trees, if you will, towards a liberating justice for our own education, for our own experiences within the schooling experience, the education experience, or the navigation of life. And joy maintains this idea that in the midst of fighting for my justice, fighting for what I need in order to be my fullest self, I can still have joy in this process as well, because I'm the owner of my knowledge. I'm the owner of my learning. And when we started to talk about what does that mean to be the taking the ownership of learning as like a CEO, if you will, the chief executive officer of your learning, that means you have full authority to advocate for what it is that you need in your learning experience to thrive. And part of that means that there's a joy aspect of knowing your gifts, your talents, your skills, what you bring to the table, what you still need to have to get even better in your gifts, while also doing the light shaking every once in a while in a respectful way to allow for those other things that you need in order to be presented. And so the heart of the title of the talk was the conundrum between the joy and the trouble towards justice, because it's always uncomfortable when we have to step out of that comfort zone to the level of uncomfort in order to get something that we need or to advocate for something that's missing. That doesn't usually feel good for people, but to have the joy part of it allows us to step in it knowing that we have coverage and protection along the way.
Oh, and I thank you for the definition of joy and happiness, because I think a lot of the times people use them in not right ways. And I also love the reminder that, joy is in the midst of all of the emotions that we feel, right? That two things can exist at once, even if they are on the opposite sides of spectrum. So, and also just a reminder of good trouble. I was like, yeah, yes, familiar with that. So thank you for that. And I think another thing too that you said that really stuck out to me is that you can be joyful and respectful, right? Like there's a way to do both, right? It's not like we're just going to be steamrolling everyone. It's like, no, we can do it in a respectful way, regardless of what our views are. We could still have those really powerful conversations so that we could move forward to serve our students in the best way possible, right? So I really love that reminder too. And I always say too, if you are always comfortable, that means you're not learning, right? Like I love it when I feel uncomfortable, because I'm like, okay, like things are moving in my brain, right? Like I'm being receptive, I'm being challenged. And these are things that I really, really appreciate when people teach me, correct me, do all the things, right? So now when we're talking about joy and justice, right, the joyful trouble, how do you think this mindset helps teachers move away from that traditional rigid control and toward like a classroom where student-led advocacy is actually the goal? Because you are very much about student advocacy.
Yes, it's very true. And I think it's not easy, like you could just implement this and just start using it. I think there's a lot of undoing of certain ways that we experience classroom teaching from a student lens, and then when we now reciprocate back out. So my favorite teachers, Mr. McLean and Miss Ashraf. Mr. McLean was my fourth and fifth grade elementary school teacher. Miss Ashraf was my chemistry teacher in high school. What made them so special was that they elevated student voice to be knowledge bearers of the classroom space. They allow for students to discover, to be curious, to ask questions, to discover, to explore. and did it in a way that was still sheltered in the in the standpoint that I'm going to walk you through how to get to the finish line, but I'm going to have you discover what that looks like. And not only for yourself, but you're going to actually learn in an interdependent way how you're going to leverage each other classmates, other students along the way. And these teachers essentially took a step backwards by allowing for students to be the discoverer of knowledge, and then they became what we call the person that asks questions, the person that facilitates discussion. That's what I was looking for. Facilitating discussions. They facilitated what was the next thing that we needed to learn, or what was the next element that we needed to talk about when it came to a math problem or a reading story or what have you, or a science project, what have you. So I think that's one of the first things, is that in teaching, we do a lot of talking, and we don't give students enough opportunity to practice the skills of full literacy. When I say literacy, yep, I'm talking reading, but I'm also talking writing, speaking, listening to a variety of different voices, and taking in all of these contributors, if you will, to learning. So I think that's the first part, is that we were shifting how we approach teaching from a traditional, I give you knowledge, I'm the knowledge bearer, you ask questions, I give you answers, go work on it, to we are all collectively engaging in continuous learning. Because if you're a teacher, you're a model of learning. You have 25 students, 30 students, a caseload of 100 students, maybe. You have a bunch of students, a bunch of educators you're working with, a bunch of families you're working with, the community that you're working with. So you're constantly learning about what that environment looks like, what each member within the community looks like, your learning community looks like, and their story that they're telling as well. What's their goals, what they're trying to accomplish. And you're supporting them along the way by finding that next piece in that journey. You're watering that seed just a little bit more in that 180 days that they're with you. And that's how we start to shift from the teacher led to the student supported, student guided instructional practices that leads to that joy piece coming out, while also maintaining structure. I'm still going to guide you towards what the objective is, what the final goal is, but we're going to do that together. We're going to get there together in an interdependent way rather than depending on me.
And that's a really this is something that I've been sitting with as well, that I need to reflect on or just add on to my vocabulary of the interdependent. Because I always say we love self-directed learners, which we do, right? That independent learning is really important. It's really important. And I say that a lot. I don't say enough the importance of interdependent learning, because again, that is being in community, that is working like learning from each other, as opposed to just, I'm going to do this by myself independently, or I'm just going to bug the teacher until they tell me what the answer is, right? So thank you for that reminder. I think our listeners really appreciate that too. Another piece too that I love is you shouting out your teachers in elementary school. I think that is fantastic. And it made me reflect as well, as you were talking, about how my third grade teacher, Miss Wilkins, mind you, I had just moved from the Philippines, so to South Georgia of all places, right? And Miss Wilkins was the one who made sure I was okay, made sure that I was comfortable, made sure that I had people that I was talking to, made sure that my classmates were checking in on me. So it's really like, shout out to you, Miss Wilkins. I don't know where you're at now, but like third grade, right? Like that is amazing. That impact that teachers have on young learners. And you also said that teachers do a lot of talking. Facts.
Oh my goodness. The amount of times that I've done a lot of talking in there and went one ear out the other, and everyone's still asking, so what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. And I did that, right? I was an English teacher, middle school English teacher. And so I thought all my stories were important and that they were going to hear my voice all day long. And learning again that I needed to step back and invite the students to be a part of this teaching and learning journey, like you said, like what your teachers created for you. So I love that whole piece of like, hey, you know what, students can discover, they can ask questions, they can be curious, they can be playful, they can do all of these things. I am a guide here, and we're going to do all of this together as we work through the problems and the skills and the strategies that we need to accomplish, right? And so I really love that piece. And another thing that I was thinking about too is this advocacy part, the student advocacy, right? Like here at Modern Classrooms, we're all about, again, creating self-directed learners and for students to understand what their learning styles are, and not saying that like, oh, visual or whatever, but like what works in their brain. And we want students to advocate and say like, hey, this is how I learn. This is how I would explain or understand, or this is how I can show you mastery. I can show you that I know the things, right? And so we're really helping our students to advocate for their needs through self-pacing, through the blended learning and mastery-based learning that we do at Modern Classrooms. And so I love that there's this alignment too of like the advocacy for learning, and then for you all like an advocacy for justice. Like let's get all that learning, and then now let's use it outside of this classroom. And so that there's that continuous learning, right? And I think we're always going to be learning forever. And so, you know, again, I love this TED Talk, and we're going to put it in the show notes, listeners, so that you can access it right away. Your students used academic tools like opinion articles to lobby for more recess. And that was something that you talked about, which I was like, elementary school kids doing this? That's so cool. And you know, arguing that it would lead to deeper learning. And I think one of the things that you said was like, make it relevant for the kids, and they will use the tools that we're teaching them in the way that we want them to use it, right? In the way that we would be really proud of them. So like, how does mastering these skills rather than just finishing an assignment turn students into the true drivers of their own school experience?
And I'll tell this through the recess example, because I think there's power in the collective. Um, I think to start off this question, right? You know, in writing or in school with different assignments, like they can have a tangible effect if we are able to apply what we're doing in practice into real life application. And it really started with some students just bringing up the fact that, hey, I don't have enough time at recess. I get 15 minutes, and I don't even get 15 minutes because I'm all the way in the third floor. I got to walk all the way down to the first floor, get outside. So I already lost a minute right there. Then I got to figure out, because there's 125 people, I got to figure out what I'm trying to do. Well, that takes up time to do it. Now I get the game I want to play. Maybe I get a round or two, the whistle blows, because they want to make sure I get back in time for the next activity. So I don't get enough time for recess. And if I had from 15 minutes to, let's say, 30 minutes, one time a day, 30 minutes, rather than these two 15-minute blocks, I'm going to be able to have more time to play. A lot of students had these same arguments. And what we talked about together in this recess debate specifically was, you know, recess is a conversation that, you know, forever kids have had debates with about this should be longer or what have you. And the principal is well aware of this, but in order for us to really convince him that like we need this change, we need to provide arguments, research that actually supports why having more recess time is actually beneficial for you, right? Because just saying you want more time, he's not. He might be like, oh, I understand that, and that might be the all it's going to come out to be. If you really want movement, we need to back this thing up with legitimate research and arguments that at least brings him to the table for us to really have a conversation with the principal. So we started to organize different ideas, and you know, students did some research and identified that, yeah, you know what, if we have more recess time from 15 minutes to 30 minutes, we actually allow for more socialization and friendship building with friends. We get more time to actually play. But here's the thing, this is the one that I think won the conversation. We also have the ability to focus in class longer because we got a lot of this energy out. And so they were able to back up these ideas with research they've done from other articles that we read about regarding recess. And, and we invited the principal, hey, come into the class. The whole class would like to talk to you about this idea of recess. And the principal came in and listened to every student's arguments. And so, like, I really appreciate this. I'm going to go back to the table and, I'm going to take a look at all of the things and, let's see what happens. And the next school year, they shifted. They went from two 15-minute blocks to a 30-minute block. And students were very happy about that. And I think this really goes into this larger idea of advocacy. What does this look like? Advocacy, can look like literally shaking tables, but it can also be a joyful excitement where we get to empower ourselves with why we need this change that we're actually advocating for. And a lot of kids didn't realize, like, oh, there's a lot more benefits than just playing 5 more minutes of Gaga ball every day. I'm realizing that actually I could build longer, deeper friendships with people. I can learn longer. I have the ability to connect with my teachers and my classmates and other friends from the grade level, and that's powerful. It's a powerful move of advocacy, and it just leads to like what that can do for a change in an environment to support the experience that students have in their schooling experience.
It's that empowerment, right? Like, oh, I'm part of the decision-making process now. Like, my voice matters, and that is exciting. And I think there's a lot more motivation and passion that goes into a classroom and a school and a district when people feel heard and valued, right? And so I love that you created this space and that you invited your students to be like, okay, y'all want this? This is something that actually brings you joy, recess. So now let's advocate for something that we all want, right? And because you did your research, you have your evidence, like you did all the critical thinking skills, and then you invited a real audience, right, to come in there and have those conversations. I mean, that is something that they're probably going to remember for a while, right? If not forever. And I really love, because that's just like one of the stories that you shared in that TED Talk. And the second story that you said was actually really heartwarming as well, right? And it was a student L who's from Chilean heritage, right, background, and had mentioned about the Hispanic Heritage Month of being like, hey, I didn't really see myself represented. And instead of shutting down, like, I love the fact that, L was just like, Dr. Washington, we got to have a conversation. This isn't working for me, so I need something, right? I need this to change. And that's where like the persuasive letter and the persuasive skills came in. And so tell us a little bit more about that too.
Absolutely. And it was funny because it was right in the middle of our persuasive essay unit. So like it just really happened to be a point of the time in the school year where we are just shifting over to persuasive writing and how to make convincing arguments for a change that we want to see, whether it's home, school, whatever the place may be. And so for Elle's experience in the TED Talk, we explored this idea of Hispanic Heritage Month and what that looked like for her. In the TED Talk, I talked about how Elle was really excited about Hispanic Heritage Month and learning about various Hispanic communities and cultures. And she would go to music class, and she's expecting to learn about dances and music, and she wasn't getting that. She came to my class, my homeroom class. We weren't talking about Hispanic Heritage Month. And all throughout the day, in her schooling every day, it was an absent conversation. And I talk about how that silence speaks volume, and the invisibility is a stare that you're able to recognize that pierces your heart. And it was humbling to recognize, and listening to Al share that I was not seen, I was not heard, and I did not learn about myself the way that I wanted to. And that's a disappointment I have. And I really appreciate her language of she's disappointed with the experience. Not necessarily that she's angry at anybody necessarily, but the experience that she had was a disappointment. She expected higher from all of those that were around her. So she spoke with a calm, cool, I'm disappointed volume. And then what made Elle's story much powerful to be told was that and I'm going to do something about it. You see, a lot of times we in a society, we see an issue, we expect somebody else to do it, and someone else got to go and fix that. And there's a responsibility where we also have to do our 1 yard forward. We also have to take that next step forward. And Al modeled for a lot of people how to take the next step forward. I'm going to write a persuasive essay. And I'm just going to just name what my experience was like. She had no idea where that was going to go or how that was going to do. But the fact that she said, like, I'm going to write, not pointed at other people. She owned her emotional state. She owned how she felt in the moment. I'm going to write this persuasive essay because this is what I need. And then when she learned that I was going to speak to a bunch of superintendents, it just happened to work out. Can you present this on my behalf? Because I can't be there, but can you support me by presenting this? And I'm like, of course, because at the end of the day, we took responsibility of writing this essay to seek a change. I have to do my part as a teacher to advocate for that change in spaces that you're not able to attend. And remember your story and remember how you felt in that conversation on that particular day. And because of that learning experience, Hispanic Heritage Month looked totally different the next year because of those experiences that we was able to share. And so I think to any listener, any educator, or just anyone who's just a lover of people and, you care about people, you care about kids or what have you, it's very valuable for us to be able to have a listening ear to the concerns and be able to appreciate those concerns and support folks in their healing process. For Al specifically, that was, I'm going to write. She was prompting herself that I'm going to take care of this by writing because no one else was going to do that, So she made the leverage forward to getting the engine started. And then I just had to drive it home. That's all it was.
Yeah. And something that I was reminded or I learned recently from Dr. Bettina Love is that sometimes I think it's one of those things where shame is human, right? Like we're all humans. So shame, that is an emotion that's going to show up. And what she said was, don't get stuck in that shame. Don't get stuck in the shame where you're not moving forward, right? Because I know sometimes for me, if a student's like, hey, Ms. D, you actually messed this up, right? Like, or you assumed this thing, or like you said this thing. There's that shame. And then I'm like, dang, what do I do now, right? Like, we got to move forward with like, what is the next step, right? Instead of being stuck in that shame. And so I really love this reminder that like emotions come and go, the steadiness is constant. Because I think a lot of the times we do allow our emotions to just show up as is, as opposed to being like, okay, hold on, like there's something coming up for me. Let's evaluate this before we use our words in a way that we're probably going to regret later, right?
Absolutely.
And you said too, we're a model of learning, right? You said that previously. And our students pay attention to our actions, our moods, our behaviors. And this is something I tell my teachers all the time that I work with is like, when you believe in students, especially when it comes to like self-pacing, which is really challenging, when you believe that your students are able to do it, they also believe that they can do it, right? Because there's so many comments of like, oh, my kids can't do that. My kids can't do this. My kids have this, so they can't do this. And it's like, no. When we believe students, right, and we have high expectations of them, warm demander kind of deal, right? Then our students are actually going to meet and exceed our expectations. So I love all of these things. And you just make it so relevant and real world.
Hey there, listeners. This is Zach. Got some announcements for you this week. You can join the Modern Classrooms Project on June 23rd for the Leadership Collaborative Summit 2026, a free virtual event for K-12 school and district leaders. This year's theme is Personalized by Design, and it's built around a core belief. Every student learns differently, and the best learning communities are built to act on that. You'll hear from principals, district leaders, and coaches from across the country who are making instruction more human through mastery-based, student-centered approaches and getting real results. Every session is led by practitioners and designed to give you strategies you can act on this fall. Help us spread the Modern Classrooms model. Refer a friend and earn swag. Know a colleague or school leader who would love our summer learning opportunities? Fill out the form linked in the show notes and MCP will take it from there. MCP will reach out to them with information on the model and their exclusive discount code. As always, you can find more information and links in the show notes for this episode, but now let's get back into it with Deshawn and Tony Rose.
And so I do want to shift because we're talking about literacy. Now let's talk a little about math, because math education is a little wild right now, right? And that's all across the nation. And so Modern Classroom was founded by 2 math teachers. So like math education is like deep into our souls as an organization. And so I'm curious because you also turned a classroom lesson about financial literacy into a statewide movement and actual legislation, right? So let's talk about that, because financial literacy is, again, something that we don't talk about often. And there is math involved in that, right? And that is making math more relevant to the students who are learning more about math. So talk me through this like thought process as well of like, you know what, this is a need and I want to do something about it. And I know that your organization as well, Cultivating Changemakers, is about financial literacy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, first, I'm a huge math fan. It's actually, I know we talked a lot of literacy. Actually, math is my favorite subject of the subjects we got a chance to teach. Love them all, but math was just a little bit more because of the complexity of problem solving, the different methods that you can move towards a problem, the ways you could show strategies, the ways you could argue for or against a particular strategy and what's the most efficient, how you analyze, reason, explain, and all the literacy components that go into math. I think people forget as you go up the grades in math, there is a literacy component that comes in with mathematics. And you have to understand how to read problems, understand what the problems are. Those are all the literacy elements. How to write your responses out, all that's literacy. So I love math. I think math is just a great complex way of engaging in problem solving, and it's such a way that it's also joyful with the different ways that you could choose to explore math. But the way that financial literacy got started was every year I would have a financial analyst come to my class. This would usually be out of popular demand. Kids wanting to learn about money. And, a lot of these curriculums in math in 3rd, 4th grade, like, yeah, you might talk about it passively, like in a larger context of a particular type of unit, but it's not really the focus. It's just like they're using dollars and cents to do a problem. So I had this financial analyst come to the class. They were amazing. They had so many great knowledge, so much knowledge of, um, financial literacy, investments, starting businesses, the whole nine. And you should see the kids, the light bulbs, which is just spilling out. I mean, like kids were connecting to personal experiences. They were connecting to what they seen on TV, their own mothers and their own grandmothers, their dads, going to the bank accounts, and they're like, oh, wow. And then I had to start doing some research afterwards because I'm like, well, how many kids actually do talk about financial literacy? And so in Massachusetts, we're actually one currently, as we do this recording today, we're one of 10 states in the entire country that does not have a financial literacy semester long mandated course that all high school kids need to take towards graduation. What does that mean? That means that we have approximately, 90% of our students in Massachusetts never learning about financial literacy. If you just happen to be in one of the schools that actually have a financial literacy course, you're blessed. But for most kids, they're going through K to 12, never talking about money in any sort of capacity. And it's a scary prognosis for me to recognize that so many kids are going through learning and never learning about one of the few items that you literally going to use every single day of your life, money, and how to use as a vessel towards purpose. So cultivating change makers in its inception was really built on this idea of closing a financial literacy gap in Massachusetts. really wanted it to be where 100% of kids from all backgrounds, from all walks of life, get to have the joy of learning about how they can make money work for them. And, one of the ways I decided to do this was that in elementary school, we really don't have many books on money and savings and things like that. And so I wrote three children's books on financial literacy. Part one book is called CC's Money Seeds. One book is called CC Waters a Jar, and one book is called CC's Classroom Budget. And they're built to support young children in the K to 5 space to learn about certain skills, foundational skills of financial literacy, how to budget, how to identify your needs versus your wants, how to build a savings account, how to give money to and donate money, how to spend money in a wise, responsible way. We wanted to curb that gap. And then on top of that, less than half of 1% of all books written on financial literacy has a Black protagonist. So we also wanted to curb that gap as well by having a visual representation of a child that many kids could look to and be like, oh, I relate to them in skin tone, I could relate to them in visual appearance, the locks, all these different things like that. And that was something that was very important to begin that process. And, right now, the bill passed legislation in the House to have a mandate financial literacy bill. At the time of this recording, we're still advocating for making sure that it's a semester long course, because having a course that's only a one-off one day is not enough information for young folks to know. They need to have a opportunity where they take it for a semester long and learn about all of the foundational skills of financial literacy. And then if they want to learn more, like investments or entrepreneurship, we can have those offerings available. The last thing I'll say about this is that, in Cultivating Changemakers, which I founded, we're also working with young people as well. We're working with high school students between ages of 14 to 17, land their first, paying job. And they actually have part of their job, quote unquote, is they actually learn financial literacy. We provide internships for those young folks to be able to come to our site to learn about financial literacy, apply these skills into practice, to learn how to use their voice to testify, also learn how to use their voice to create projects of how you're going to be a lifelong budgeter of your money. So you're not reoccurring debt like 85% of this country is, but instead you're able to liberate your life through literacy, financial literacy in this case, and be able to thrive altogether. So that's a lot of the work that we're trying to do. And at the heart of it, mathematics is where it's at because it's about problem solving. We're solving a problem that's been outstanding for a long time.
Whew, and I am over here almost 40 learning all of those skills now, right? Because again, there was that lack of financial literacy education that's happened in the past. And so thank you for this work, Dr. Washington. This is amazing. Again, making it into real world application. It is really important for us to continue showing up for our students and then and teaching them the skills that they need, yes, to pass those tests, right? Like, we're going to be honest, there's tests, right? Yes to passing those tests. Yes to like learning together in community. And then also let's take it back to the community. Let's take it back to where we can thrive as human beings in this world and also help others alongside. So I appreciate your expertise. I appreciate your experiences. Thank you for all the things that you do for our students. And just thank you for being in this space with me and sharing all the things. I appreciate you, Dr. Washington.
I appreciate you, Tony Rose, and thank you for just making a few minutes for me today. It's humbling and such a joy to share these stories, and hopefully the listening audience is able to be empowered by our conversation today.
I'm definitely empowered. So I'm pretty sure our listeners are also like, oh my gosh, that was great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Listeners, remember you can always email us at podcast@modernclassrooms.org. And you can find the links to topics and tools we discussed, as well as more info on this week's announcements and events, in the show notes for this episode at podcast.modernclassrooms.org. We'll have this episode's recap and transcript uploaded to the Modern Classrooms blog on Friday, so be sure to check there or check back in the show notes for this episode if you'd like to access those. And if you enjoy our podcast and it's been helpful in supporting you to create a blended, self-paced, mastery-based learning environment, we would love if you could leave a review. That does help other folks find our podcast. And of course, you can always learn the essentials of our model, if you want to go beyond the podcast, through our free course at learn.modernclassrooms.org. And you can follow us on social media at ModernClassProj. That's Proj. We are so appreciative of all the hard work you do for students and schools. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.